Hey, we're live.
Right, we are reconvening our morning meeting and shifting gears to our draft request 250991, which is establishing a PRO for bottle redemption system. And we have our first witness joining us by Zoom, Mike Smaha. Welcome.
Good morning. I appreciate everybody's time. Good morning, Chair Sheldon, Vice Chair Labor, and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Michael Smaha. I'm Vice President, Government Relations for the Can Manufacturers Institute. We are the trade association that manufactures metal cans, and we also represent metal can suppliers, the folks making the aluminum can sheet, and the folks who really want the recycled aluminum cans back. So I'll just keep my remarks brief. Of most interest for CMI in the draft language is Section 1524 around labeling. Under the proposed changes, the section would allow can makers flexibility in where the deposit value and label can be placed on the can. Currently, Vermont requires that the can lid be incised with the refund information, actually making Vermont a bit of an outlier because Vermont and California are the only two recycling refund or deposit states that require the can lid to be incised with the redemption information. California is probably going to be undergoing a rulemaking process to eliminate this requirement this year. So the reason why this is important to us is I don't know if you can, you take a look at the lid of the can. Incising the can lids actually become more difficult because we as can maker or metal makers are using significantly less metal in the lids and the cans of the walls, causing them to become thinner. In fact, we've reduced the amount of metal by 30% over the last 30 years, and we hope to even go further than that. And this action obviously, reflects our commitment to environmental stewardship. But as a result, the depth of the incisions on the lid is less deep, and it's a lot more crowded, as you can see when you take a look at the lid. And it makes it a little less visible for consumers than it was in the past. So there's really very little room now on the lid of the can for additional states, which we're hoping to bring into deposit programs in the future as we're actively pursuing these programs in other states. So someday we're hoping to add some additional states, but obviously that would lead to some additional crowding on that lid. So, oh, sorry, was there a question?
Not yet.
Okay.
Thank
So by eliminating the requirement that the lid be incised, yet retaining the information on the label itself, we do think that one, the consumer is aware that there is a redemption value on the can, and that the can complies with the deposit laws in Vermont as well as the 9 other states that have these programs. Just shifting gears real quick to the producer responsibility organization. Where our members are not producers and we wouldn't have any obligation under this program, but we recognize that these programs require some substantial funding sources for the necessary upgrades to bring more efficiency to the program and hopefully more redemption access for folks across the state of Vermont. So we just encourage you all to work with the various stakeholders that have, financial interests, ranging from the environmental groups that are concerned about the funding for clean water in the state to the producers who are running the program to see if there are opportunities to find cost savings, because it's really important that additional, as much revenue and from the unclaimed deposits is able to help finance this transition to a PRO run program. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Sure. Thanks for your testimony. Since it sounds like you work with a lot of states on this, can you help us understand how other states are financing their PROs, and are they using the bottle deposits to do that?
Well, it varies by state to state. Now, some states, Oregon, for example, allows the pro to keep all of the unfunded, or I'm sorry, unredeemed deposits, and all of that money goes back into the system for innovation, um, to stand up additional redemption centers and options for residents to participate. Now, some states do have a sharing of the unredeemed deposits that are devoted to other kinds of programs similar to Vermont. But I can say from our work in trying to stand up new programs, specifically in Washington State, Rhode Island, and Illinois, we really are advocating that all of the unredeemed deposits stay within the system itself to fund the program, especially the startup costs for these. And then again, to make sure that there's equal access and equity, and that rural communities and urban communities all have enough redemption options for folks to participate in.
Do members have questions? If you would just take a minute to speak to why you support these, not only the existing bottle bill states, but pursuing other states as well.
Yeah, happy to do so. Well, I think the data never lies, right? The states that have deposits on their containers by far see the highest number of recycling rates, also lower number of litter, which is always a positive thing. So the 10 states that have these programs are really essential sources of used beverage cans for our folks. Our folks are buying these used cans, and they're remaking them in can sheet facilities across the United States, and then sending that can sheet out to produce new cans for the market. In the Northeast, we do have can making happening in Connecticut and New York.
And so you're buying them from whom?
So our members are buying them from the folks who are operating these systems. Oftentimes, it could be, TOMRA, which obviously runs for reverse vending machines, but there's a company called Clink out of Maine that runs a bag drop program. So they're also a source. And then there's independent redemption centers in some states that are also sources for us. And I will say, it's a bit ironic because today is quote unquote Liberation Day, where more tariffs are going to be put on everything. And that includes primary can sheet that we're importing from Canada and other countries. So, for us, it becomes even more of an important, way for us to save money and pass that savings on to consumers to use as much of the recycled cans that we are consuming here in the United States versus having to buy can sheet from other countries.
Yeah. And so you would be buying them from our PRO? Should we establish the PRO?
Absolutely.
So they would be getting income from that?
They would.
Mm-hmm. Can you give us a sense of what kind of income that would result for them?
That I can't say. As an association, we can't get into contractual discussions between buyers and suppliers. But I think the fair market rate for used beverage cans is always pretty substantial. We're always proud to say that the aluminum beverage can is one of the most valuable commodities that you're going to find in the recycle bin. So I think there's a fair market value out for it.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much for your testimony this morning and joining us.
Sure, I'm happy to do it. Please let me know if there's any additional information we can provide. We're happy to do it.
Okay, we have one more question.
Oh, sure.
Just curious, besides cans, when you go to the recycling centers, there's another place to put foil and stuff like that. Does that foil get reused and become what? Beverage cans or?
No, that would. So our members don't make the aluminum foil, so I'm not the subject matter expert when it comes to aluminum foil, but that material, I believe, is bought in the marketplace, and it is reused to make other kinds of aluminum materials.
So not all aluminum is created equal.
That's correct.
Like pie pans and stuff like that go in those bins too. I thought it was all aluminum, would just get made into other aluminum stuff.
Yeah,
Okay.
different alloys for different kinds of products.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right. Thank you again.
Thank you. Take care.
Next up, we have John Langus, who's joining us in person. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Sorry I was late.
Thanks for coming up. Putney.
Perfect timing. Roadblock on I-89 today.
Oh, wonderful.
Good morning, dear committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to join you today to share my experience with you about the Vermont Bottle Bill and the Container Redemption System, to offer my thoughts on DR 250991 and its proposal to create a producer responsibility organization to manage the future of the bottle bill. My name is John Langus. I live in Norwich. I'm a former member of the Norwich Select Board, renewable energy entrepreneur, owner of Wisdom and Power, of Vermont energy and climate consulting firm. Most relevant to you today, I'm one of the owners of Putney Road Redemption Center in Brattleboro. Putney Road has operated for over 30 years, has been owned by my partners and me for over 8 years now. We understand that Putney Road is the single largest independent redemption center in Vermont. We're responsible for about 6% of the statewide redemption volume last time I checked. So I want to start with just a quick refresher on how the industry works. The bottle bill mandates that beverage companies, as the producers of the disposable containers, collect a 5-cent deposit on the disposable containers for carbonated beverages sold in Vermont. That deposit provides an incentive for the consumer to return the container back to the manufacturer so that they can properly dispose of it. The deposit is first charged by the manufacturers when the beverage is sold to retailers. Then the deposit is then collected from consumers by the retailers who sell those containers in Vermont. Consumers pay the 5-cent deposit when they buy the beverages in Vermont and can get that deposit back by redeeming the empty container where they purchase it or at a certified redemption center like ours. So the big difference is that retail outlets are only required to redeem containers that they sell, only the brands that they sell. A certified redemption center must redeem any container presented to it that has the Vermont 5-cent stamp on its label. So once collected, those redeemed containers are picked back up by the distributors in the case of retail outlets, or by TOMRA in the case of redemption centers. We are paid the 5-cent deposit, which we've given to the folks redeeming their containers, plus we get a 3.5-cent handling fee, so 4 cents actually, for the sorted brands, and that's compensation for having to collect, sort, and package for recollection those redeemed containers. Finally, all the deposits that are not paid back through the redemption process to consumers are then paid on to the state in recognition of the burden that unredeemed containers have on the solid waste disposal systems in the state of Vermont. Those unredeemed deposits are commonly known as the escheats. So as an initial matter, we continue to believe that the bottle bill should be expanded to cover water, sports drinks, and wine. There's no rational reason to exclude these containers from the bottle bill other than the fact that they either did not exist or did not represent a significant portion of the containers when the bottle bill was first passed. The bottle bill is incredibly popular in Vermont, as is its expansion. It is the single most successful recycling policy in the state. Current bill does not seek to expand the bottle bill. We continue to believe that it should. We also continue to advocate for an increase in the handling fee paid for those who are charged with redeeming containers for the manufacturers and the distributors. The fee has never been increased. The current bill increases the handling fee for the sorted containers by 1 cent. We believe that that fee should be increased for all containers. Our revenues are a function of legislation. We are a regulated market where the government sets our prices. Government does not, however, set our costs. My partners and I are active supporters of the $15 minimum wage. We pay above the current minimum wage at Putney Road. After the payment of deposits to redemption centers, payroll taxes, and workers' comp are our highest costs of business. Vermont is a high-cost labor market, as we all know. Labor is generally in short supply here. Each one of our employees is worth far more than they make. as are all Vermonters at the low end of the wage scale. Please don't make a false choice between what is good for Vermont workers and what is good for the environment. So the main thrust of the bill today is the establishment and operation of a producer responsibility organization. The main structure and responsibilities laid out in this bill seem appropriate to us. The primary concern that we have with the bill is that it places those being regulated in charge of managing the implementation of the regulations and thereby of achieving the goals of those regulations. Regulatory capture is rampant in every level of government. This bill seems to start with that capture and hope that things improve from there. We believe that the producer responsibility organization should include at least one redemption center owner and at least one independent person or organization with expertise surrounding the structuring of recycling markets. An NGO such as VPIRG, someone like that would be a good choice in our view. Manufacturers and distributors are burdened by the bottle bill. Rightly so, in my view, because they've made the decision to build a multi-billion-dollar business case on the conversion of natural resources into garbage, with no functional plan to take responsibility for that garbage. Given that burden, it is naive at best to expect them to energetically work to develop redemption in Vermont to its full potential. We must have other voices in this process. Thanks for the opportunity to give my testimony today. Happy to talk to any of you about any questions you might have.
Great. Really interesting suggestion. Good idea. Yeah. So the suggestion of having someone who currently runs a redemption center in Vermont, as well as kind of an outside environmental supporter of goals of the PRO, be part of the management of the PRO. Yeah. Do members have questions? Representative
Just
Boston.
Real quickly, if you could just clarify
Mhm.
how the conflict between, it's in the last paragraph about implementation.
The regulated being,
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's the
Clear-
folks that bear the burdens of those regulations being in charge of managing this. So when a decision has to be made,
Yeah,
one might expect them to choose the thing that is most expedient for them as the burdened party,
and these,
not the choice that would be the most effective in achieving the goals of the bottle bill.
okay, and these are the retail, the sellers you're talking about?
The manufacturers.
The
and distributors, really.
manufacturers, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, the retailers are just sort of sit in the middle of the system. They're just trying to make a buck, one Coke at a time.
just to kind of go back to the beginning of your presentation on following the money. Do you also get money for selling the cans?
No, so they're either, cans that are not part of the redemption process.
Oh,
We occasionally get cans turned into us that don't have that aren't supposed to be redeemed. So we set those aside. And yes, any aluminum can, as the gentleman just said, those are always valuable. So we just separately send those to a recycling facility.
So the person who picks up your cans is Tomra,
Yes,
and they receive money for the cans from the manufacturers.
correct. And then they pay it on to us.
The questions, Representative Tagliabue?
The plastic bottles that are recyclable but are not subject to a deposit right now, they are currently worth something in the market as well. Is that correct?
They certainly used to be, right? So one of the problems with single stream that was meant to make it easier to recycle, right? We've got lots more material going into folks' recycle bins, but what comes out of that process is considerably less than before single stream recycling because it gets so contaminated. So, I think 3 or 4 years ago, for example, China just said, we're not going to take any more of your recyclable material because it's too contaminated and too much of it is just garbage. And so I don't have good statistics on that, but several people maintain good statistics on the percentage of the recycling stream that ends up in landfill because it's just too gross to be recycled. So if it's clean, if it comes through the redemption process, right, that's the most recyclable stream in Vermont because it's relatively clean. It's totally separate from, so you got your glass, you got your plastic, and you got your aluminum. And so all of that gets recycled, and there's definitely value to that clean plastic.
Further questions? Thank you again, Peter. Representative Morris.
How many sorts do you have?
Gosh, it's over 20. I think 22, something like that. So it's quite impressive to watch. When I give testimony before, I have an open invitation if anyone wants to come down and see the guys working and see how it works. It's quite impressive, actually. So we have two things when we hire folks. We do a background check, and we have them count a bag of containers. And I think it's like 118. And it's amazing. Like, you don't get like 116 or 119. You get like 83, 142. Like, people are all over the place. If you can, with all the noise going on and people coming in and out of the door, if you can count that bag accurately, it's actually not that many people that can do that well. And so then those folks then have a bunch of different bags going at any given time that and they have to keep those straight. And we have an excellent record with Tamara of having consistently, accurate counts and things like that. So there's a little bit of trick to it. Yeah.
Have you thought about upgrading to any different technologies?
We look occasionally at technologies for sorting. To date, we've been a little bit small for that. So, if there was something that came out of this PRO where some small retailers didn't want to be dealing with the redemption, and somehow that got fed to a couple of the independents and the volume got bigger, then that might be something different. Expanding the bottle bill would have done that. That would have doubled our number of containers coming through.
And do you have a sense of your kind of bottle shed? If you're 6% and you're in southern Vermont, how many towns are you draining?
It's pretty local, right? It doesn't make much sense to go very far to carry. I'm actually the first day that we owned the shop. One of my favorite stories is this woman came in with a bag of Polar sparkling water, and it's like 20 bottles, and it's very professional looking. It was during the lunch hour, and we have a group of charities that sometimes people donate, and then their nickels go to these charities. And I said, "Oh, you donate to one of these charities?" She said, "No, I just drink a lot of this water." And I said, "Okay, here's your dollar." It was really amazing to me that there are all these people that are just committed to, that's what we do. We redeem our containers, and it's rarely worth your time to do that, much less if you're very far away. So I think it's pretty small.
One more.
Quick, thank you, Madam Chair. Concerns about, you're on the border of New Hampshire. Any concerns about cans, materials coming in?
There's a big kerfluffle a few years ago when we first bought the business. The law is very clear, right? It says a redemption shall take any properly presented container, right? Everybody knows that there's stuff. There's a lot of commerce across the border. But the bottom line is the manufacturers made a business choice to print all their cans exactly the same, right? So they are the ones that tend to come back and say, "Oh, it seems like there are cans coming across from New Hampshire." Like, well, geez, what would be the easy way to not have that? Not stamp the ones that you sell in New Hampshire, but don't come to me. Like, I need to, if someone brings me a can and it says Vermont 5 cents, I redeem that can. But I don't think anyone's studied, like, if you're on the west side of the state as a redemption center, where New York is there, they have their own nickel, right? We're right on the southern border. Massachusetts has their own, right? No one's really done a study to say, well, does it look like there's really much different happening on those two sides of the state? Yeah, presumably there's a lot of cans that get bought in Vermont that get all across New Hampshire that don't.
People go where it's convenient. Yeah. Thank you again for your testimony.
Yeah,
Thank you all.
so much.
Appreciate it.
Next up, we're gonna.
Does anyone do I need to leave a hard copy of my testimony for the record? Or you have it?
We have it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We have Susan Collins joining us from California. via Zoom.
Not from me.
No differences. So welcome back or to the newly configured House Environment Committee. I don't know quite how long your presentation will go, but I want to let you know that I have to step out at 11 to go talk to our Senate colleagues. Don't take it personally. I'll leave you in good hands, but welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, the rest of the committee. I actually have it in my bio on Twitter, not the senator from Maine, because that does come up from time to time. So you made me chuckle this morning. Thank you for that. I'm going to take just a moment to find my presentation so I can share that with you. There we go. And since what I'm seeing is different from what you're seeing, I'll ask you, is this showing up okay?
It will in a minute. We're not seeing a slideshow yet. We're seeing your slide sorter. There you go. Yep, that looks
Very
great.
good. Thank you. Thank you. So again, thanks for having me today. I am Susan Collins, the president of the Container Recycling Institute. And just to explain a little bit about who the Container Recycling Institute is, we've been around for more than 30 years. We do research, education, and advocacy. Our mission is to make North America the global model for the collection and high quality recycling of packaging materials. And much of what we focus on is beverage container recycling and deposit legislation. And we have 2 websites, and one of them focuses just on all of the different bottle bills around the world. So I have some general information in support of the legislation that you're considering today or discussing today. But a lot of what I have to present to you today is just to give context and to answer some of the questions that I've heard. I've listened to some of the testimony from the week before last. So here we are at redemption rates for U.S. deposit states. This is the 2023 data. And you can see Vermont is sort of on the high side there. It's color-coded orange to indicate that the deposit value is mixed. Some of the containers are at 5 cents and some are at 15 cents. And we found that those mixed rates tend to pull the redemption rate for the entire state up a little bit. So you can see that in the ones that are there in orange. Generally, you've heard about some of the benefits of deposit systems. I just have them all sort of summarized here on one slide. Of course, the high recycling rate, and the gentleman who just spoke was talking about clean materials for manufacturing. There's a huge difference in the quality of materials that come out of bottle bill programs versus single stream recycling. Of course, they create jobs and new businesses, and those jobs are very local, as you've seen. It's not something that can be outsourced to another state, for example. It shifts the end of life costs for the beverage containers to the producers. Obviously, reduces litter, conserves energy and natural resources, reduces greenhouse gas emissions, and prevents other types of pollution as well. Also, just to reiterate the issue about having higher recycling rates when there's a deposit on a container. These are the national statistics from 2021 that we have compiled. And you can see that non-deposit containers versus deposit containers, it's a doubling, tripling, even sometimes quadrupling of the recycling rates if the beverage container is on deposit versus if it is not. This answers a question that was just asked a few minutes ago. The economic benefits of bottle bills include the fact that the deposit scrap is far more valuable, and that's because it literally contains less trash in it. So there's less that the processor has to do to clean up the material in order to make it back into a raw material again. So these statistics are for PET plastic and glass. PET plastic typically sells for 40% less if it's from a curbside program versus deposit program. And these statistics are gathered by a company called recyclingmarkets.net. And so we subscribe to that service and occasionally pull those numbers. When it comes to glass, I'm not even using the word glass for what comes out of single stream curbside programs. I'm calling it a glass mixture now because it typically contains 40 or even higher, even 50 or 60% non-glass materials. So it really is a glass mixture. And that's what makes it so hard to handle after it leaves a material recovery facility. So there are also benefits to municipalities, and I don't think this has come up a lot in the conversation so far. The municipalities, Massachusetts found several years ago that they were saving $7 million a year. And that was all the way back in 2009. So multiply that by at least a factor of 2 to bring it to today's prices. They receive cost savings from reduced collection costs, landfill costs, processing costs, and the reduced costs for pickup of litter. And I'm just bringing this up to add additional context. These are savings that are already being experienced in Vermont that may not really be considered on a day-to-day basis. But there were some discussions of greenhouse gas emissions from the containers, and I wanted again to emphasize that the beverage container deposit law is reducing greenhouse gases in several different ways that are superior to what happens in curbside recycling. So the first is that there are higher recovery rates for the materials. The second is that the material is cleaner, so that a ton of material that comes out of a curbside program isn't the same as a ton that comes out of a bottle bill program, because the bottle bill material is almost 100% pure material that can be recycled. And then there are also just greenhouse gas emissions that are reduced from the reduced amount of processing. The processing that's needed for bottle bill glass is far lower, and so there are less emissions there too. Recently, Keep America Beautiful did a litter study, and I've got 2 findings here from that study. One of them is sort of a public opinion poll kind of result that nationally people said 75% of people said that they would support a refundable deposit or rebate incentive, and that's nationally. And I know the polling results are higher in states that already do have bottle bills and are familiar with it, and especially the polling results are much higher in Vermont. The key finding of the study, though, because it was a litter study, was that there was substantially more deposit material litter per capita in non-bottle bill states than in bottle bill states, by a difference of a 2-to-1 ratio, meaning the deposit states had only half as much beverage container litter than the other states. So the litter reduction aspect is really significant. This statistic is from a study that we did several years ago, and the numbers have only gotten worse. But at that time, we found that if you collect 100 tons of recyclables at the curb, on average, only 75 tons are actually recycled into new products, and most of the rest will be landfilled. That's not just because of the contamination that is directly put in the bin. For this study, we found that the average residual rate that was being reported was in the range of 9 or 10%. But the other big chunk of material that was not being made into new products was material that was mis-sorted and sent to the wrong recycling facility. So on this next slide, I've got a more recent example of that. This is a new study that was just released last year in the state of Oregon. And they found that in the state's curbside programs, these numbers are astounding. 41% of plastic bottles and 53% of aluminum beverage cans were improperly sorted and ended up in the wrong bale. So we've seen other research that shows aluminum cans on average are mis-sorted. 1 out of 3 goes into the wrong bale at a curbside material recovery facility. But in this particular study, they found that 1 out of 2, half of the aluminum beverage cans were improperly sorted, meaning they may never get recycled. Here is what this kind of contamination looks like visually. This is why I say I'm not referring to glass that comes out of these programs as glass. It's a glass mixture really with paper and plastic mixed into it and metals as well. So these two pictures, the one on the left is glass from a container deposit program, and you can see those are whole glass bottles. And the one on the right is literally what came off of a truck from a material recovery facility. And to be fair, the paper floats to the top. So a lot of what you're seeing here is the paper, and there is glass in this pile, but obviously you can't see it at first sight. Now I'm going to go into what's been happening lately, not only in the United States, but around the world. And again, there were several questions on this in the committee hearing earlier. So there's been more legislative activity around the United States this year than any of the 15 years that I've worked in this job. We've seen new legislation for new deposit programs in 7 states this year so far. And then there are bills to expand or modernize programs in these 6 states. And it did come up in earlier testimony that some of the states have modernized. So Vermont's program really has pretty much stayed frozen in time, with the exception of the introduction to of the commingling agreement several years ago. I think that was back in 2007, 2009, something like that. But a lot of these other states have had round after round of modernization. Oregon had legislation in 2011 with implementation dates in 2017 and forward, like several rounds of changes that happened in a good sequence. Connecticut most recently did this. California did massive modernization, a bill that was passed in 2022. So a lot of these states have really done a lot to modernize their programs, and they look a lot different than they looked when they were first started. So here's what's happened in Connecticut. They passed their legislation in 2021, and it addressed convenience. It required more stores to have reverse vending machines. It had a grant program to build new redemption centers. It expanded the law to include more non-carbonated beverages, and it updated the amount of the deposit from 5 cents to 10 cents. And then it also had an aspect where there was revenue sharing with the unclaimed deposits. So all of that happened in a very logical sequence. And now we're seeing the results of this moving toward meeting a goal of a higher redemption rate there. This is what happened last year after they went from 5 cents to 10 cents. Their redemption rate had been under 50% the previous year. It increased to 52% in quarter 1, 57% in quarter 2, 71% in quarter 3, and now 77% in the 4th quarter of 2024, just last year. Now I'm going to show a couple of pictures of some other places where we're seeing changes. A group of legislators and nonprofits and businesses went on this trip sponsored by the Ocean Plastics Leadership Network. This was the 2024 Northeast Technical Expedition that went to both Maine and Quebec. And we saw the new centers that had been designed by Clink. These are bag drop centers. So people go to it's basically a container like this that is powered with solar power, and it has electricity so that you can show your little tag to the scanner, and it will allow the door to open. It will unlock the door so that you can take your bag of recyclables and put it inside, and also scan the little label that's on your bag so that they know that's your bag of containers that went inside. So this is a bag drop site, and they're able to deploy these in parking lots throughout the state. And they're doing this we have versions of this in Oregon and Maine and Connecticut and Iowa now. Here is a new redemption center in Quebec, Canada, brand new, just in the last 6 months. So this has multiple ways you can redeem your containers. You can use upper left, you can see a regular reverse vending machine, feed them in one at a time. Lower left, that's a bag drop door. So again, you scan your tag, you open the door, you drop your bag in, you walk away, they count it for you and credit your account. And then a photo that I'm not showing here, but they also in this same center have bulk redemption. So they have huge trays where you can drop all of your containers in and they'll go through a counting machine and count everything rapidly. I've just got a couple more slides here on international things. We've seen tremendous growth around the world in container deposit laws. Up till the year 2017, we had laws that only covered 357 million people around the world. And the laws that have been implemented just since 2017 are covering more than 500 million people. So this issue has more than doubled in just the last 8 years. And you can see how the map is sort of filling up, and we keep having to update this map because more countries and states are coming on all the time. So here's what it looks like in another way, where this growth was sort of steady. We saw a big increase in the early 2000s, another big increase in 2017, and the chart has sort of gone vertical since then because so many more countries have been added, and we keep adding the population onto this. So tremendous popularity of these programs around the world. The latest international news is that Romania reported that in their first year of the program, they recovered 3.5 billion beverage containers. Yes, that's billion with a B. I had shown you that in Quebec, they're doing all sorts of things to modernize their program. And their latest change was just at the beginning of March, where they added more containers to their program. That's in addition to adding these new redemption centers around the province. And then Poland is expected to begin sometime in 2025. And we also recently got news from the UK. They'd been working on it a long time, and finally, most of the UK is moving forward. England and Northern Ireland will be moving forward in 2027. They've just adopted their regulations. Then Wales will also start, and Scotland will move at the same time as England and Northern Ireland in 2027. So this is the last slide of substance that I have. This is an art project that we did to demonstrate one person's beverage container consumption in a year. I think at the time this was 822 containers, and this is in exactly the right proportion of plastic to glass to aluminum, and exactly the right proportion of wine to milk to soda to water. You get it. This is really meant to represent just one person's consumption of beverage containers every year. So it's a subject that's trivialized, but obviously this is not trivial. This is potentially a lot of waste or potentially a lot of recyclables. And with that, I'll say thank you for your attention, and also give this information here on ways that you can get more information from our website or contact us directly if you have questions. And with that, I will stop sharing. Thank you.
Thank you for all that information. Do members have questions? Representative Bartholomew and then Austin.
I'm really impressed with this international map. I was just gonna point out though, check Europe, the couple of countries that are mislabeled.
Thank you.
Representative Austin.
Yep. It looks like 37 states have no recycling program. Is that accurate? There are 13 that do. And I'm just
It's actually that there was the 13 was the new legislation that had been introduced this year in 2025 that we're tracking and participating in. But as far as beverage container deposit laws, there are 10 US states plus Guam that have beverage container deposit laws, and 40 states that do not, plus DC.
So the 40 states that don't, do you have any estimate of how much greenhouse gas emissions results in them not having a recycling program? And does it cost states who are recycling? Does it cost anything if they don't, if a state doesn't, if these states don't recycle?
So I don't have it off the top of my head, but yes, greenhouse gas emissions resulting from the containers that are not recycled is something that we do track. I believe our statistic on what the cost to society is of that, when you put it in terms of energy, it's somewhere in the range of 2.5 to 3 million homes worth of energy that is squandered every year by not recycling those containers. In terms of greenhouse gas, I think we convert that into, cars off the road equivalent that could be saved if we were reducing those greenhouse gases, but I don't have that at the tip of my fingers right now.
Are there any other costs? I mean, financial or any other ways that states that don't participate impact other states? Impact other states?
Yes. So one that I think I can remember correctly, we just released a report. We did a really deep dive into aluminum can recycling that we just released on January 31st of this year. And if I'm remembering correctly, it was $1 billion worth of aluminum cans that go into the landfill every year because they're not recycled.
In the United States.
Yes.
Can you help us understand the increased interest in bottle redemption programs around the world? How do you, what's causing that?
There were several things that we saw back in the 2017 to 2020 timeframe that a lot of it had to do with plastic pollution and the world waking up to all of the scary facts about plastic pollution, about, something like, and I'm not going to get these quite right either, because I'm not completely prepared for this question, but it's something like 8 tons per second or per minute goes into the ocean in terms of plastic waste all the time, 8 tons per, whether it's second or minute, I can't remember. But those statistics came to light. People quantified it. And for example, Sky News, which is a station in the UK, did a year-long public interest project that was just about plastic pollution. And it really awakened people, and it got them to be interested in this type of legislation. And that was happening all over the world. It was that the legislation covered more containers in Canada, in Australia. Australia went from having just one province or one of their states with a container deposit law back in 2010 to now the entire continent. All of the states in Australia now have a container deposit law. So people just were becoming more and more aware of litter and pollution and climate change, and they wanted to address all of those. And this is, a great way to do that.
Can you help us understand who's against bottle bills?
In the United States, most of the folks who come and testify against container deposit laws are waste haulers and beverage industry folks, like the beverage associations of the different states. So I would say that's, I'm thinking back to legislation that was discussed last year in Minnesota, and those were the folks who were opposed. Also retailers.
Yeah, Representative Tagliavia.
On one of the slides you showed, I think Romania was one of the countries that had it newly implemented recycling or redemption. Do you know what the income, monthly or yearly income per individual is in some of the European countries that have newly instituted these bottle bills?
Off the top of my head, no, I can't tell you the average income of those folks, but I do know that there is a study that looks at the amount of the deposit compared to disposable income country by country. And so that it shows that the deposit level is usually set at a rate that's meaningful for and appropriate for each of the countries.
Are there any other questions of the presenter? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you
your
very much.
testimony. Next, we have Matt Chapman. He's a frequent flyer here.
Good morning.
Morning.
For the record, my name is Matt Chapman. I'm the Director of the Waste Management Prevention Division at the Agency of Natural Resources. So I'm happy to just generally open up and answer any questions that people have and sort of have a general conversation. I certainly was here, I think, a couple of weeks ago to talk about the beverage container system generally and H158 specifically. And I'm happy to go through DR 25-991 to just sort of lay out what I think are a few changes that we would recommend. But I guess I would say two overarching broad principles. The agency is very much supportive of modernizing the beverage container collection system. I think it's just noted, it hasn't really been significantly modernized or altered since 10 or 15 years ago when we did commingling, and even that was not the most significant alteration. The other is I think, that transition, it will have costs associated with it. So folks just need to understand, in order to make this work well, we need to think about how we create an architecture for appropriate investments in new technology, new collection, and other things that are out there. And that's kind of outside of what I normally do on a daily basis, but that is something that we need to be aware of as we go through this. I guess with those sort of preface remarks, I have actually very few comments to the drafting request. The first one that I have is on page 9 of the request. It's a pretty simple change on line 4. Basically, we're recommending that there be the addition of a mandatory registration requirement with the PRO in addition to participating within it. We've experienced challenges in other producer responsibility organizations and systems that some of the participants aren't coming to the table to sort of contribute to the establishment of the system before the system sort of gets off the ground and going. And so we think a registration requirement before the PRO gets stood up will require independent members who are not currently a part of the commingling agreement to come into the PRO system and pay their fair share of setting up the new system. The next change is again, I think it's pretty minor. It's on page 12 around the convenience of collection. And I'm just going to briefly describe what I think this section is intended to do. And I think this is probably more of just me getting with Mike and giving him a suggestion on drafting. If you look at so basically what it does is it sets up at least 3 points of redemption and per county and 1 per municipality greater than 7,000 persons. And I think that the sort of third element in here that redemption needs to be cited sort of in dense areas or village centers or the sort of designations is intended to apply to A and B and not be sort of a freestanding requirement itself. So it just needs to be redrafted in a way to make it clear that what we want is these new redemption centers or the redemption centers to be sort of in village centers so they're walkable for people to redeem their bottles of cans. The next recommended change is it sort of starts on page 16, goes over onto page 17 with respect to the beverage container redemption rate goal. And really, it's eliminating subdivision 4. I mean, I think that if you look at most of the beverage container redemption systems throughout the United States, if we get up to 85%, I think we should say that's a success. And I think we should come back and revisit things if we get up to 85%. But I think 85% is a very ambitious goal, and setting a 90% goal may be too much. It may be an overestimate as far as the percentage that we should be looking for, at least right now. And again, the goal is set for at least in the law 2042, which it's a long range, right? So I think that just setting a 2037 goal and trying to strive to achieve it and reassessing it as we get closer to that date makes more sense from the agency's perspective.
Yes, Representative Checker.
And just on that point,
Sure.
especially based on some of the testimony we've heard just earlier today, it seems like achieving those kinds of goals would really require likely an increase in the deposit.
I don't know. I guess, we're at 71%. We sort of vacillate somewhere between 68 and 75%. So reaching the 75% is fairly clear to me that that's an achievable goal. I mean, I guess the question is, and this is when we look at the beverage container law now, there are a lot of what I would call redemption deserts throughout the state of Vermont, where it's not very easy for people living in those areas to redeem their containers. And if we make it easier for people to redeem their containers, I think it would be interesting to see what participation and success rate we get. I guess I'm unconvinced that a 10% or a 10-cent deposit is necessary to get there in Vermont. Our data is different than a lot of other states. There's a recycling ethos in Vermont. People recycle here more than maybe they do in other locations.
Recycling is different than redemption. And so while I might be very motivated to make sure this is getting recycled in some way, my time is valuable and everybody's time is valuable. And so if we leave a 5-cent deposit that's been there for decades in place I'm not suggesting we change the deposit in this bill. I'm trying to acknowledge what you're saying, which is that the alignment of a goal with the changes we're making have to align. And so making more redemption centers where we have deserts might get us from 71 to 80. But is it really it doesn't see what I'm hearing from the testimony is you can't really get close to 100% unless you're making it valuable enough. People have to put that value in there. So,
I guess I would say, let me just sort of answer your question by giving another suggested set of changes, which is if you look down to subdivision 2 on page 17, it basically tells the agency to report back to the legislature and make recommendations on how to approve this, including taking a look at the 10-cent deposit. So it neither is a preconceived notion that we would go there, nor is it one that we would take off the table and completely eliminate. I guess one change that we would recommend, we do a biennial solid waste report where we do most of our reporting in the solid waste world. I would recommend that we change this reporting requirement to being biennial and include it in a report as sort of a call out item that we do anyway. Again, we just trying to prevent the proliferation of a million different reports that the agency needs to provide. So the next change is on page 20, section 3. We would recommend deleting section 3. And the reason for that deletion is that we basically applied for and obtained a federal grant last year to do this study. And we're very near the end of it and are prepared to basically, hopefully before the end of the session, come in with an analysis of sort of the costs and some of the benefits associated with the beverage redemption system. I mean, I think everyone should just be aware, right? We're looking at sort of, I'm going to call it the recycling system, because what you do in the beverage redemption system has impacts on municipal recycling. Some of the material that you're dealing with in the bottle bill is the best material for municipal recycling. And when you pull it out of the recycling stream and into the beverage redemption system stream, there are financial impacts on sort of traditional municipal recycling. So that's what this report does. It just sort of looks at 3 different models, where we're at today, basically what we're kind of looking at in DR 991, and then also what was being looked at in H last year with expansion and sort of the cost to the system on all of those different approaches.
I'm struggling a little bit with what you just said. Can you go back over that with the municipal costs to?
Sure. I mean, basically, I think Susan said, and I had some numbers in my that have been aluminum, for example, the salvage value or the material value of aluminum is incredibly high. It is worth a lot of money, frankly, whether you're collecting it in the bottle bill system or you're collecting it in the curbside recycling system. So that material goes to the materials recovery facility, either in Rutland or in Chittenden County. That high value material helps subsidize some of the low value material that's being collected there, like glass or other sorts of materials that are being collected in the recycling system. So when a lot, not all, but a lot of the aluminum is beverage container material. So if you expand the bottle bill and pull it out of the recycling stream and pull it over to the beverage redemption stream, then municipalities or solid waste folks are not getting the value of that material to basically subsidize the costly material. And the cost of the system goes up. And so part of what we're trying to look at is, lining up the two systems and showing when you make a change in one, what are the impacts in the other? What are the costs, both in raw numbers, but also in a per container cost associated with each of these two systems? And what's the sort of greenhouse gas value? Because there is, I think everyone agrees, recycling like aluminum is incredibly energy intensive to make new aluminum sheet can material. So,
Well, the reason, if I could, sorry.
Go ahead.
The reason I asked that is because what's the goal here? Is the goal recycling or is the goal the redemption dollars? Because if it's recycling, who cares which entity is recycling it as long as it's not winding up in a landfill?
So I will tell you from the state of Vermont, from my perspective, as the person doing the waste management work, my primary objective is to make sure the material doesn't end up in the landfill. And a secondary objective is making sure that we are getting the highest value material out of the recycled material that we can. And, I think that I would quibble with Ms. Collins' numbers a little bit on some of the numbers that she put up as far as the value of various material streams coming out of a MRF. I mean, basically the short version of it is the higher tech MRF you have, the more valuable the material is because the better it's sorted at the MRF. And we're in the process of building a state-of-the-art MRF in Chittenden County right now. We're poised to start that process. But again, having said that, I mean, clearly the bottle bill there's more value for glass collected in the bottle bill than through sort of the curbside recycling program. Our goal is to recycle as much material as we possibly can. I think adjacent to that goal, if we're going to have a bottle bill, you should have the most efficient bottle bill system that you possibly can, right? You don't want to put a 5-cent deposit on material, and then because you have a system where no one can actually redeem those containers, that you're sort of forcing them to escheat those containers. That seems to be a bad policy objective. All right.
Go ahead.
Oh,
I'll, if I still have the question when you're done,
please continue.
I'm just curious, you talked about state-of-the-art redemption center. How long before once it's up and running, how long before it actually pays for itself?
I don't honestly, I don't know as far as payback numbers either on technology being used in the beverage redemption center or in the recycling center, what the paybacks are on those. That's just not something we deal with.
Representative Sacklowitz.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. A question and a request. You'll put all your suggested changes.
I will.
Writing.
I will.
I
Absolutely.
had the same question.
This testimony came up a little quick, so
Fair enough.
yes, I'm happy to.
Okay. And then my question is, we heard in testimony when we previously that some of the numbers for the rates of redemption, that they are sort of artificial, they're inflated by containers that are coming in from other places. And it was uncertain like what the magnitude of that effect is. And I'm just wondering if you have any sense of how big that number is. And if you don't, if there's not too cumbersome way to get at that?
I mean, I think the answer is no. I don't really know what the number is, and it's kind of difficult to do it. I mean, we know, like, we've seen municipal trucks from villages in New Hampshire being filled with beverage containers and taken to redemption centers in Vermont. And that's clearly a no-no. And we've let those towns know that they can't do that. Whether an individual goes and shops in West Lebanon or Keene, New Hampshire, and then comes across the border and redeems, I mean, that is technically, they're not supposed to do that. They shouldn't be doing that. We don't have a really good way of tracking or enforcing that.
It seems like there might be a way to compile the information from various sources to get at, oh, we're, this, you know what I'm saying? Like there might be a way to kind of get at it indirectly. I know you can't measure it on a basis.
Sure, I am more than happy to go back, talk to staff, and actually work with the commingling agreement folks to see whether there's a best estimate that we can come up with. But I think it's probably fair to say that it will be an estimate, right? Yeah.
I would expect it to be an estimate.
Yep. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Representative Norris.
Yeah, Matt, thanks. Is there is the technology available now? I mean, it looks like it was from what Susan Collins presented to us, but is the technology available now to just plug in the automated capabilities for auto sorting so we can eliminate all this manual counting of sorting of stuff?
I would say yes, but so some of those systems are, and I would sort of defer to whether it be Susan or frankly the beverage folks. Some of those systems require a high upfront capital cost, and you need to have the throughput through the system in order to make it viable to put in that sort of technology. And I think that's sort of one of the challenges in doing this. And I think sort of one of the preface comments that I gave, which is like, there is a capital cost that comes with setting up any sort of like new and revised system. And those are legitimate and real. And it's trying to figure out how we can most effectively deploy technology like the kinds of technologies that Susan was showing at a Vermont scale, right? And I think that's sort of Vermont historically, I think everybody knows this. I think it's around 93% of the beverage containers redeemed in Vermont are redeemed through redemption centers. So we are still using pretty old, the hand sorting technology, you got it, to do redemption in Vermont.
So follow-up question. So I think I heard yes.
The answer is yes. I mean, all of those technologies are out there and exist. And frankly, I think the benefit of having a PRO is that you have a sort of centralized entity who can look across the state and think about how to manage a system like a system as opposed to the way it's being managed right now.
And my follow-on question, and you may not know the answer, is do you know how much those systems cost?
I defer to others on that.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for your testimony, Matt.
So one last comment, and it's probably on the bill, and it's probably the largest one, which is in section 4. So we would recommend that when the PRO becomes effective, that the handling fee be repealed. And so let me walk through that for just a second. The way the collection plan is currently created, it requires a minimum number of facilities, and that all retail redemption centers be fairly compensated for what they've done. And I think sort of reflecting the statements that were made today, like having a fixed number for a handling fee in the statute and having the legislature manage the amount of money that people get paid for redemption doesn't make sense. Having people paid on a per can unit when you're using, like if you have a clink system and you've agreed to put a big box and take up like 4 parking spots in your retail, is it really 3.5 to 5 cents to run that machine, or is the per unit value lower, or is it a different form of compensation? Because the agency's view is that once we get the PRO up and operating, this is a market function and let the market kind of deal with how people get compensated and let the PRO communicate with people. It costs probably incrementally more to recycle a can in Essex County than it does in Chittenden County, right? It's just there are fewer people, fewer stores. You may have to pay more. Let the PRO negotiate those costs out and not have some sort of statutory level setting that. All right, now I'll
Now
conclude
you can
my
go.
testimony.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We should take a very short break. What do folks think?
Anybody need a break or
Go
can
on
we
to
just keep
others,
on
or-
going?
I didn't know we had more testimony. Are we expecting
Yeah.
another?
Yes, 11:15, we have,
Oh, sorry.
I do have a, Mr. Chair, if I may, a question of Matt. Matt, you said do away with section 4 of the repeal?
No, include in section 4 a repeal of the handling fee.
Oh, include.
Yes, add in the handling fee to the repeal section.
Thank you. Like,
You're welcome.
I'm missing.
And like I said, I will provide written sort of changes this afternoon.
thank you, Matt.
Here we might like a very short break.
Just a very short break. How about coming back by 25 after?
Ooh, that's 7 minutes. That's not generous.
10 to 5.
You're more generous than Amy. We might vote for you first.
Doubt that's.